So is it true the ARC is endorsing candidates this year?
Yeah, but only third party.
Oh, okay. Legalize marijuana now. Is that true? The ARC has taken a position on that?
No. We are strictly a nonpartisan 501c3 organization. The ARC Minnesota has not, will not endorse candidates for public office, but we do encourage everyone to get out and vote.
Oh, I thought you went 04 and you're endorsing candidates. That's a rumor I heard. Well, I did go to Don and Colleen Lavin's cabin a couple weeks ago, and we had a nice afternoon there. They have a beautiful place up by Zimmerman.
Oh, wow. That sounds beautiful.
Yeah, on a small lake, but a beautiful view. They have loons right out front and an eagle that hangs out on their lake. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we've had so many eagles. I'm in St. Paul, kind of close to the river, and we see them all the time. It is just wonderful.
Yeah. Last week, I took a solo kayak ride down we live by the Mississippi up here in Monticello, and I went up to Clear Lake, and Joan dropped me off. So I took a solo kayak trip down for 14 or 15 miles and did not see another person except when I went by one park for the whole trip down. So that was nice.
Wow, that sounds beautiful.
It was a warmer day.
Yeah, warmer than today. It's cool out there. It's beautiful, but it's cool.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm John Coopers. I have an eagle's nest that's right on a white pine right between my property and my neighbors at my lake place up in Birchwood, Wisconsin. And it's just magnificent to see the eagles. Although at 5:30 in the morning, some mornings I don't like them cackling. You know, they don't. they cackle. They don't. Make that Hollywood sound that you hear on the TVs and movies. But there's something else to see. That's for sure.
Are they cackling at you, John, or are they?
My daughter likes to think they are.
Okay.
They're hungry for kind of middle-aged men, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know. They're just amazing though. They often will cackle just before they even take off in flight, which is kind of neat, but not always. But we love to see them.
Well, John, it's nice to meet you. We have a meeting
nice to meet
scheduled,
you,
I think, for next week or something.
We are. We're scheduled on the 7th for a phone conversation. Yes.
Good.
If you want to turn to Zoom, we can do that.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to visiting.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. But
we'll just give this another minute and see who else might still join. Yeah, we'll just give this maybe one more minute. We're at 4:03, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for attending the 4th of our 6-part Supporters CEO series. My name is Andrea Zuber, and I'm the CEO of the ARC Minnesota. We created this series of events as a platform to be able to share updates with all of you, even though we can't meet together in person. I know that I am regularly out meeting with people who support the ARC Minnesota and community members, and haven't been able to do that, unfortunately, for the last 6 months. And so this is just one way that we're trying to be able to still connect with folks. We hope that these events can somewhat replicate that feeling and give you an opportunity to learn more about our impact this year, and also an opportunity to ask questions. So I am just going to go over a little bit of Zoom etiquette. I think most of you are really familiar with Zoom technology and have become familiar over the last 6 months, but it might be a little new to some. So I just wanted to share a little bit about how this particular meeting will work. Everyone was muted upon entry so that we don't have background noise during the presentation portion of the event. So you should try to keep your microphone on mute unless you're asking a question. If you have a question, you can ask it at any time in the chat window, and that button can be found at the bottom of your screen. We will hold on to the questions that you put in chat for the Q&A portion of the event, and then we'll address it at that time. So we're just asking that you hold questions until the slide comes on the screen that indicates it's time for questions. And then you'll be able to ask us directly. And today I will be presenting, as well as Alicia Munson, our Public Policy Director at the ARC Minnesota. So you'll have both of us to be able to direct questions to. And you can click on the participants button and click raise hand while we're in that, and then we'll know to call on you. So today we're going to go over just some updates from me, and then we are going to hear from Jean Hoff, who testified at the legislature for one of our bills this year. We'll have updates from our Public Policy Director, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. And then we're going to close with a video about somebody who has found a job and just the journey that he went through to get to the place where he's now working in the community. So at the ARC Minnesota, our mission is to promote and protect the human rights of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or IDD, supporting them and their families in a lifetime of full inclusion and belonging in their communities. And if we deliver on our mission, our vision is that families, people with IDD and their families, will have hope and confidence and knowledge that they need to be able to live a life they choose, and equitable systems and communities to support them. So over the past year, we've been closely examining why and how we do our work. And we believe that part of how we are going to realize our mission and our vision is to relentlessly highlight the strength and capacity that people with disabilities have, and promote a just society where everyone is known to be valuable and have worth. And we want to do that by demonstrating the way that people with disabilities are living now. People with IDD, if you've been at some of these sessions and will hear today, and some of the ones coming up, are living in homes of their own. They're working in jobs at livable wages. They're going to college, they're falling in love, they're getting married and having families of their own. And all of that really isn't just something that we're hoping to have possible someday in the future. It's happening now, that people with disabilities are living lives of the community. And that said, we also know that too many people with IDD still find that kind of life to be out of reach, and they are considered too disabled, and too many people with disabilities feel isolated, and too many people with disabilities are living in poverty. And when we have done research and interviews and focus groups, what we've heard over and over again is that is because people with IDD are seen as different and separate and unknown, and they're seen as weak and needy and vulnerable and dependent. And so we want to reframe that narrative. People with disabilities and their families are asking for so much more. They want to be healthy, go to school, college, live with friends and loved ones, have a job that pays livable wages, and be truly valued, have belonging and have justice and be able to thrive. So that isn't what we've typically expected for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities or supported them to do. And I know sometimes when I talk about this vision, people think I'm only talking about people with a high level of skill or ability in terms of what's considered normed in our society, you know, things like IQ, verbal speech, mobility. And I always want to be clear that people know that I'm not just talking about one group of people. We do intend this vision is for all people, and some people may require significantly more support than others, but we truly are talking about all people and believe that we can get there. So we recognize that it's more important than ever to stand as accomplices and in allyship with people with disabilities and their families to support them to achieve their goals and live a life of the community. Our work is also to form and support partnerships, coalitions, and engage the community to be ready to move in this direction as well. So We need employers that will hire people and landlords that will rent to people and neighbors who will befriend and support people. And we have to move outside of the disability community and engage all people in this. We need to combat the low expectations and negative stereotypes that people with disabilities face. And again, we want to completely reframe the narrative that we've held for people with disabilities and highlight their power and their strength and their capacity, their wisdom and their resiliency, and demonstrate that the return on investment in this population will exponentially improve and lift up our whole communities and society. So at our gala this past March, the ARC Minnesota launched a movement to spread that message of capacity and possibility to our communities. And you can hear more about the work that we're doing to launch that movement in an upcoming one of these sessions. So in March of this year, like many others, we quickly shifted gears to address COVID-19 related issues. I keep saying that it is evident now more than ever how necessary our services are. This pandemic and crisis has caused some backslip to old ways of thinking, and people with disabilities were some of the first to be discounted and cast aside and othered and dismissed. And at the ARC Minnesota, we've stayed true to our work to highlight the significant return on investment that we get at the individual, familial, and societal level when we dedicate resources and support people with IDD. Our program and operations staff have been working remotely since March, and we've been able to continue to provide all of our services and have actually expanded to cover COVID-19 related issues. So far this year, we have served over 1,200 people with 1,800 different issues, and COVID-19 was an indirect factor in almost every call that we've had since March. The issues have included isolation, rights restrictions, stimulus payments and how they affect benefits, unemployment benefits, and financial aid. We have administered over $70,000 in grants specific to COVID-19 relief for housing needs and technology needs that people have related to the pandemic. We developed a COVID-19 resources webpage, and then we have also done an immense amount of work of COVID-19 related lobbying and policy work that you will hear more about from Alicia in a few minutes. So now we're going to hear from Jean Hoff. Jean is from Minnetonka. She is dual enrolled this year in school at Orono Public Schools and Duke's University. I don't know if I said that right. Sorry, you'll have to correct me when you start, Jean. She is interested in pursuing a career in mass media, and Jean is currently an independent contractor helping companies with their social media. Jean testified at the Capitol this winter and just had her TV interview with Disability Viewpoints. So I'm going to turn it over to Jean to hear about the testimony that she provided at the Capitol for us. Jean?
Thank you, Alicia, for the introduction. I'm happy to share about my experience. Spotty decision making gives me the responsibility and freedom to make my own decision with the help that I need. I have my own goals and life plans. As a young adult, I am making my own decision to go to college. I have a career and live independently. My family is supporting me in making my decision for the life that I want. I applied to 4 different universities and was accepted to the best college options. For me was Duquesne University in Pittsburgh in August. I started my college classes at Duquesne University. Through distance learning, I plan to move on campus next fall. The career I am interested in pursuing is in mass media. I took some classes for internation and started helping companies with their social media. After college, I want to earn a livable wage in a career of my choice and live in my own home where I want to live. This past year, I have also advocated at Minnesota Legislature. I testified about my experience sport, decision making, and advocate for updating the Minnesota scholarship laws. I also advocate for expanding Minnesota college options for students with technical and environmental disabilities. I have talked with state senators and representatives and testified at the Senator Higher Education Community. I work with Alicia Manson to have advocated for the lesser changes. I am pleased that the scholarship bill passed and we were able to raise awareness for expanding Minnesota college options.
Great. Thank you so much, Jean. I'm so glad that you could be here with us today. I really appreciate it. All right. Now we are going to go to Alicia Munson, our Public Policy Director.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you so much, Jean, for joining us today and for your advocacy up at the Capitol. It was just such a pleasure to work with you and your mom, Mary. So again, thank you for your advocacy. We couldn't have done it without you. As Andrea mentioned, my name is Alicia Munson. I'm the Public Policy Director with the ARC Minnesota. I am so grateful that all of you are here to learn about our legislative successes from the last legislative session, to learn a little bit about what we've been doing in response to COVID-19, of course, what's going to be coming up, and how you can make sure that you are engaged in public policy efforts moving forward, most importantly by voting this fall. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out. I know my esteemed predecessor, Steve Larson, is here. So thank you, Steve, for joining us. And also another shout out to board member Nancy Fitzsimmons, who just recently stepped into the role of our Public Policy Committee Chair. So thank you, Nancy, for being here as well. You can go ahead to the next slide, Maddie. Before we get into some of the legislative successes, I wanted to be sure to highlight for all of you the ARC Minnesota's public policy values. Andrea was really eloquent in outlining the ARC Minnesota's mission, how vital it is, and really our vision moving forward. And all of that is reflected in our public policy values as well. These values are really the core of our public policy work, our legislative advocacy. They are foundational in how we determine the public policy priorities that we're going to have as an organization, the work that we're going to do in partnership with strategic partners. I saw Heather Bessinen is on the call, so at Epilepsy Foundation, a great ally of ours. And they also kind of inform the way we play defense. If there is a proposal that's going to be really harmful, we weigh it against these public policy values to determine our response. So those policy values being human and civil rights, upholding and protecting human and civil rights must be central to all public policy advocacy alongside and on behalf of people with IDD. We truly believe that all people with IDD are entitled to human and civil rights, including dignity, self-determination, voting, and equal opportunity in where they live, learn, work, worship, and play. Self-advocacy and self-direction is another one of our public policy values, and we believe that legislative advocacy must reverse the history of overprotecting and involuntarily segregating people with IDD. They must create opportunities for individuals to receive respectful support and gain and retain authority to make decisions, exert control in their lives, and advocate on their own behalf. Equity and true belonging, the next value set. Public policies must maximize inclusion and true belonging in community for people with IDD of all ages in all areas of life. Informal supports should be robust and formal services should be self-directed by the individual with help from trusted people in their lives when needed, as Jean spoke about in her comments. We must work together to build a more equitable society for all people with IDD. And those values were really instrumental in the development of our 2020 legislative agenda. We really wanted to move toward an affirmative agenda that focused on what people with IDD want to see for their lives going forward and into the future. We're working right now with members of our Public Policy Committee, health advocates, with members of our Justice Advisory Council to create a new value statement around disability and racial justice. As Andrea mentioned, we want to be accomplices in the disability and racial justice movements. We want to really demonstrate strong and meaningful allyship in those spaces. And so I'm really excited for 2021 and beyond for us to have that be a core component of our public policy work as well. So you'll see, if you did take a look at our legislative agenda for this session, you saw all of those values reflected there. One that was really I was so proud to work on was around guardianship reform. And that's the one that Jean testified about too. It had been over a decade since Minnesota's guardianship law had been updated. And so it was really important that we not only made some language changes to reflect our focus on the individual in Minnesota and their autonomy, their self-direction, their self-determination, but also really move our systems away from those most restrictive decision-making options that have been overutilized, right? So alongside a coalition of really valuable partners, including the Minnesota Consortium for Citizens with Disabilities, the Elder Justice Center, the Minnesota Disability Law Center, Volunteers of America, and others, we were successful in passing that guardianship reform bill. A couple of things that it included that are most relevant to our stakeholders are a formal definition of supported decision-making, that decision-making structure that Jean spoke about. Eliminating the use of the term ward, which is what people who are subject to guardianship were previously referred to as, eliminating that from the statute. We also strengthened the Bill of Rights for people who are subject to guardianship to make sure that they are, to the maximum extent possible, engaged in decision-making that their guardians are undertaking, that they are also going to have access to employment and employment supports. And then one other highlight of that bill, which was, I think it was like 78 pages or something like that, it was quite lengthy, was around establishing time-limited guardianship. So as you may know, right now, judges can order guardianships that are limited in their powers so that people kind of retain some of their decision-making control and get support where they need it from a guardian. But now judges can also authorize guardianships that are limited in their duration, in the amount of time, because not everyone needs a guardianship for the rest of their life, right? Maybe they are experiencing a mental health crisis and they need some support, maybe beyond an emergency guardianship, but a year, 2 years, right? There's also a language mandating time-limited guardianship for young adults with disabilities so that parents and family members really have an opportunity before going into guardianship to consider all of the options that are available to them. And maybe when the person is in their mid-20s, to look at that again and see where have they grown, where have they developed more strength and capacity in their decision-making. So we kind of move away from that expectation that people with disabilities will be subject to guardianship for their entire lives. We were also really excited to be part of a partnership with some key legislators, especially a Senate champion, Jim Abler, who's the chair of the Human Services Reform, Finance, and Policy Committee, around the development of these 3 policy statements: an employment first, independent living first, and self-direction first policy statements, to really make sure that Minnesotans with disabilities have access to competitive integrated employment. That's kind of something that's discussed with them up front, that an informed decision-making process is part of those discussions, that they have a full understanding of the options for them to live in their family home or in their own home, right? And then again, the most information about self-directed options that maximize their control and decision-making authority about their services and supports. During the 2021 legislative session, we're going to look at how we can kind of strengthen some of those policies. So that work is ongoing. It's just kind of the first step that we're taking to make sure that we're moving in this direction that reflects the vision that Andrea spoke about. We know that our community, people with disabilities, experience sexual violence at a rate 7 times higher than the rest of the population. And so it's really important for us to be equipping people with disabilities with the best information about their sexual health, their sexuality, healthy relationships, so that they can live that out for them. I know Andrea talks a lot about a lot of people with disabilities want to get married and have romantic and close partnerships in their lives. And that's so important. Direct support professionals are a key part of that process of people learning about those topics for themselves, right? And so one of the things that we did was include some language around healthy relationships, bodily autonomy in orientation and annual training for direct support professionals. Again, they are really critical allies in that work. So we were excited to see that pass this session. And then also language strengthening the Waiver Reimagined project. You guys may be aware that the Department of Human Services is taking on a pretty significant project to try to streamline access to services and supports, simplify our waiver service menu here in Minnesota. Some of the changes that we were seeking were to make sure that through the Waiver Reimagined project, individualized and self-directed service options are really promoted and highlighted, and that we're building capacity for those. So we were really excited about some of those successes. But of course, COVID kind of derailed everything in the middle of the legislative session, right? So we did have a great year. We were able to accomplish quite a lot, but session kind of shut down in the middle of March. I think it was March 13th when they noted that they would be stopping committee hearings, that they took an extended recess to try to figure out how best to respond to the pandemic. And that's what we were trying to scramble and figure out ourselves as well. As Andrea mentioned, that became a central focus of our advocacy work with individuals and in public policy. So one of the very, very first things that we did in response to the pandemic was partner with the Disability Law Center and others to put together a white paper on upholding the rights of people with disabilities during the pandemic. Again, making sure that we were counteracting some of those really harmful narratives we were hearing in relation to the pandemic, and focusing on individual power, decision-making, and control, and how they would be making decisions in response to the pandemic. We also have been working closely with state agencies, specifically the Department of Human Services, the Department of Education, and the Department of Health. And we have been really grateful to be part of several stakeholder groups, several work groups that have been formed specifically in response to the pandemic. The DHS Rights Preservation Advisory Work Group, and then the MDH Disability Advisory Work Group are two that we are still engaged in on a consistent basis several times monthly. And that's given us an opportunity to really inform their guidance that's been put out in response to the pandemic. Right now, in partnership with that Rights Preservation Advisory Group, for instance, we're working on some guidance that will be designed for people with disabilities who are accessing home and community-based services to really understand their rights ongoing through the pandemic. So that's been exciting. We've really appreciated those partnerships, and we've been able to not only inform some good guidance, but to steer away from some decision making that was kind of concerning around negative guidance that we didn't want to see. So that's been a really, really productive and positive partnership. One of the other things that we were working on was around coronavirus relief funds and how those could be leveraged to support home and community-based services during the pandemic, to not only stabilize services and supports that people are accessing, but also to promote individualized, truly community-based services and supports that help reduce the risk of transmission of COVID-19, while also helping to maximize individuals' access to competitive integrated employment and individualized housing options. So those those coronavirus relief funds and those public health grants were part of a package that were passed earlier this summer in one of the special sessions. And we were really grateful for the opportunity to weigh in on that and to advocate for those. So this work never ends. You guys know that. Of course, we're not only preparing for the 2021 legislative session, but we're also preparing for the election that's coming up. I can't believe it's October 1st already. I'm not quite sure where the months have gone since March, but we are just about 6 weeks away from the election. And so central to the ARC is making sure that people with disabilities, their family members and allies have the information, tools, and resources they need to feel informed and empowered to vote. So voter engagement has been really a strong focus of ours since the beginning of the year. We have had several voter education town hall forums. We were really honored to host one in partnership with the Secretary of State, Steve Simon, a couple of months ago. He joined and talked about the importance of mail-in voting, getting an absentee ballot, voting early, all of those kinds of things. I want to do a little bit of a plug. This Saturday, October 3rd, we are hosting another virtual town hall forum. And we will be sure to get you the time. I'm sorry, I don't remember the time off the top of my head, but that's going to be with some of the Secretary of State's staff again, talking about a range of voting options, talking about voting accessibility at the polls, what to do if you encounter a problem at the polls. But there will also be a panel of people with disabilities talking about why voting is so important to them. And then that panel will also give an opportunity to ask any questions about the election coming up and any questions about voting. So that's really exciting. We've been honored to continue to lead Minnesota's Rev Up Minnesota Coalition, which is part of a nationwide Rev Up effort that stands for Register, Educate, Vote, and Use Your Power. And really the goal is to increase the percentage of people with disabilities who are voting. And thanks, Heather, just put in the chat for me. It's at 11 o'clock and there's a link to register. Thank you so much, Heather. See, this is why we love working with EFMN. And so that's just one of the other things that we're doing to make sure that our stakeholders are prepared to vote. We're also in the process of developing a candidate survey, a reverse door knocker that will help inform people if a candidate stops by their door, some of the questions that they could ask to engage in conversation, and much more over these next couple of weeks. Something else that we've been focused on is updating our position statements, kind of coming full circle. Those values are fundamental in how we structure our public policy work, but so are our position statements. You may know that the ARC US has a whole range of position statements on issues that are really important. And as does the ARC Minnesota, we have our own specific position statements that pertain to issues that are unique to Minnesota or just areas that we really want to strengthen our focus, right? Several of the position statements that we're working on updating this year are around government as a direct service provider. So taking a look at policies that we would support or not support around state operated services. The position statement around quality assurance. How do we make sure that services and supports are maximizing quality outcomes for people? A position statement around payment of parents, family members, spouses for services that they offer to their family members. And also services around, a position statement around 24-hour services. And so how we can make sure that we are avoiding isolation and making sure that people with disabilities do find true belonging in their communities. Another one that we're working on this year, even though it's not due for revision until next year, is around employment. The ARC US position statement is very clear in that they say that we do support building capacity for competitive integrated employment and moving away from sub-minimum wage. And we want the ARC Minnesota's position statement to be even stronger than it is right now around the importance of employment first policies and also around phasing out sub-minimum wage. So we're excited to dig into that, and we will share those position statements when they're updated. So that was quite a lot to cover in a short amount of time. I want to be sure to offer an opportunity to take any questions that you may have and expand on anything that we've covered so far.
Great, thanks, Alicia. Yeah, we'll open it up for questions, and you You can ask away regarding anything that you've heard so far today or what you're wondering about.
And I told Steve earlier to make sure his questions weren't too tough, so.
How do we ask?
Well, the person who's usually monitoring our hands going up is not here. So go ahead, Steve.
Are we live?
Yeah.
Oh, has the 2021 public policy agenda been developed?
We are in the process of developing that right now. We are working with partners like the Disability Law Center, the Minnesota Consortium for Citizens with Disabilities to finalize our priorities. And we will kind of start, promoting those in the next couple of months.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Nancy?
Alicia, can you talk just briefly about your vision or possible efforts to do some collaboration outside of the disability community on issues in which we have shared values and shared needs to sort of grow a bigger tent?
Yeah, absolutely, Nancy. Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, we do have such strong collaborative partnerships within the disability community, and really to break down some of the stereotypes and harmful stigmas about people with disabilities. It's so critical that we are engaged in broader advocacy efforts, right? Poverty impacts everyone. Education disparities impact everyone. Homelessness impacts everyone. And the converse of those things, having a home is critically important to everyone, and having access to education that will help you be successful is important to everyone. And so we really are intentional about getting engaged in some strategic partnerships with coalitions that are broader than kind of the traditional quote unquote community that we work in. One of those, and Steve, you might want to go ahead and shut your mic off now. One of those is Homes for All, which is a really broad-based advocacy coalition that's focused on affordable housing. What we're bringing to the table is the lens around why accessible affordable housing is so critically important, and why affordable housing at the deepest level is so critically important. So that's a coalition that we've been involved with for several years now, and we will continue to do that. We're also partnering with Solutions Not Suspensions, which is a really prominent education advocacy coalition. Last year, some of those partners were really integral in banning suspension for students in pre-K, kindergarten. So that was really, really exciting to see. This year, we're going to be looking more at seclusion and how we can continue to reduce seclusion in our schools. So those are just a couple of examples, but yes, we are on quite a lot of issues on a broad basis, and excited to continue to expand those collaborative relationships.
Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to see who else might have a question as I click through the screen. All right, I see one in the chat from Diane Siegler Fritz. Thank you for all you do. Proud disability advocate. Do your policies resonate more with one political party than another? Based on previous years, it appears your policies resonate with Democrats. It does not matter to me. I'm just confused because you are a nonprofit and apolitical.
That's a great question, Diane. The ARC Minnesota is a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization. We have really strong champions on both sides of the aisle. We work all the time with Democrats, with Republicans, moderates and progressives, conservatives. No matter where you fall on the political spectrum, issues impacting the disability community are a priority. And we have worked, one great example is around our employment proposal from last legislative session, working to expand competitive integrated employment and increase the level of collaboration between our state agencies that oversee employment. We had a really, really strong Senate champion who was a Republican. We had a really, really strong House champion who was a Democrat. On a lot of other issues, they would be polar opposites, and we are able to find ways to promote the issues impacting people with disabilities as important and central to their work, no matter what party they are.
All right, thanks, Alicia. There's a question from Peggy O'Toole Martin. Is there any particular campaign to share the ARC values and legislative priorities with disability services around Minnesota?
Thank you for the question, Peggy. Can you expand a little bit for me on what you mean around a campaign?
Sure. I'm wondering basically how you're thinking that this information is going to get to day services and residential services around Minnesota. I feel like sometimes there's a disconnect between what we're trying to do at the ARC and some day services and some residential services. So just wondering how, it might not be a campaign, might not be the right word, but how are we working to make sure that this information is available and presented to organizations around Minnesota for discussion and for kind of doing the same thing we're doing here, asking questions and, asking for sort of more in-depth information?
That's a great question too. Thank you for helping me understand that a bit more, clarifying. So we have met already with ARM, the Residential Services Trade Association, about priorities for the next legislative session, both ARM's and those of the ARC that we're working on. And we've also already found several areas that we're going to partner on. I'm really excited that there are going to be things that we are working on jointly that we would co-brand between ARM and the ARC, especially around expanding access to assistive technology that can help people live in homes of their own with some supports. We're going to have another meeting with them tomorrow to continue to kind of strategize around that. And so then we will really, once we have those priorities identified and finalized, we'll promote them with the ARC's members and ARM members, right? Around day services, we also are in the process of scheduling a meeting with members of MORE, which is the Habilitation and Rehabilitation Trade Association, kind of the Day and Employment Services Trade Association. And so we always have meetings with them before the legislative session, sometimes again, several meetings to identify areas where we have shared priorities and different things that we're working on. So we are in constant communication with some of those partners, and then we really do make an effort to expand out our information through a lot of different communications channels. I would also just say that the ARC is still a member of the Best Life Alliance, which does include not only us, but ARM and MORE. And so even there, we're really looking at how can we be innovative? How can we be even more collaborative to kind of realize this vision that we all have, that we all share? So we have all of those conversations all the time, but continue. If you have any ideas about how to improve that in your area, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah,
all right.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yeah,
thank you, Alicia. So we have another question from Judy Moe. How does this information reach consumers?
thanks, Judy. It's nice to see you. I'm really glad you're on the call. Judy is a really strong leader in the Richfield area and just does so much. So I'm really glad that you're here. And again, Judy, I'd love to hear from you too if you have ideas about how we can expand our communications work to reach more people with disabilities, broader members of the disability community. I would say that we are consistently in communication with self-advocates. We support quite a few different self-advocacy groups from around the state. And so those leaders are getting information about and informing our work around public policy, helping us to identify our public policy priorities. We always review our legislative agenda with them. We do a lot to promote our policy priorities on social media, which I know is a really important communication platform for a lot of folks. We also have our consistent bi-weekly public policy newsletter, the Capitol Connector. And then we do really work with our regional office staff who have close connections in community in their areas of the state to get this information out broadly. But again, always hoping to improve, always hoping to reach new people, more people. And so love any creative ideas that you may have around how to do that.
All right. Thanks again, Alicia. I'm scanning to see if there's other questions that folks might have. If any hands are up.
I have a question.
Sure,
And this
go ahead, Heidi.
This is Heidi Meyer. My question is, because we're going in the direction of expanding, because I get CADI waiver, I get a waiver service and making it better. So how do we teach the services, the legislators and the doctors and nurses, everybody? Because when I had a problem, my worker could have gotten COVID-19 and he didn't have it. But when I called the doctor's office and the nurse answered the phone when I got connected to the right person, the first thing they said is, do you have a PCA? And how do people with disability have to explain their disability to the community? You know what I mean? Because we're not all PCAs, we're not all one type. So with the new changes, how are we going to talk about that? Because I feel like I'm being stereotyped a lot. You know, when I don't, because they all think all disability people have PCAs and we don't. We all have different services and we use them differently. So how is the new future and teaching going to work, and human services and the people who do our interviews and stuff? I know it's a tough question, but we talked about this a lot. And I know you at the Capitol have worked really hard to get that explained more clearly. And also asking the self-advocates. So I'm just throwing that out there. If you can help spread the word or talk about what your next idea is going to be on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. So I think a couple things. You spoke about the fact that, yeah, there are still a lot of really problematic perceptions about people with disabilities. And that's why we are working so hard to change that narrative. People with disabilities are a diverse and robust part of our communities. And we want to make sure that they feel empowered to access the information that they need, especially around COVID. We have developed a portion of our website about COVID-19, has lots of different resources, information and materials that's helpful for people with disabilities. I think to break down some of those myths and stereotypes, we are again working with that Disability Advisory Committee within the Department of Health. That's an area where we needed to really strengthen our collaboration because I think sometimes with the public health lens, they weren't really honoring the autonomy of people with disabilities and the diversity of people with disabilities, to your point. So we've been having a lot of those important conversations within that work group and within leaders in MDH, and hopefully that can transfer to some people that are offering healthcare services and supports as well, and in hospital settings as well. I hope that answered your question, Heidi, but if you want me to try to build on that anymore, I'm happy to.
No, that it's just that the first thing I told her, I have a person that comes and helps with my disability. And the first thing that came out of her mouth was the nurse said, do you have a PCA? And I had to explain that I don't have a PCA. And not everybody knows how to explain. They just know they have someone that comes and helps them. So we got to figure out how we can educate, if it's Washington, the United States, all these different people, because we have to have certain things in place in order to have what you're fighting for. And so how do we talk about that? I'm different than my friend down the street that had the disability. We might have the same insurance, but we might have different types of services or different names for our services, or we might understand what they have, but it's different than what I have, if that makes sense to you. So I'm running into a lot of stereotype and a lot of explaining, and not everyone can do that and understand how to do that. And it's not because they don't understand their disability or their program. It's just it's a complicated thing to talk about sometimes, you know, so because we don't make it easy, and some people need like a helper to say, this is their disability, this is what they need, you know. They're saying the right things.
Yeah,
So I
Heidi,
just wanted to bring that up.
I think you are such an incredible advocate in helping people learn and expand their understanding. And I'm always learning from you. And so thank you for all that you have done to help teach and educate others. Really important.
Yeah, thanks to both of you. I see a question in the chat from Nancy. Might we be part of a group looking at expanding high-speed, reliable broadband across Minnesota, given the increased reliance on teleservices?
That's a great question, Nancy. And that's actually reminding me of something that needs to be on my to-do list. I know that there is a coalition that's forming around expanding access to high-speed internet statewide. And so I think that's not something that we would necessarily take the lead on, but one of those things, like you said earlier, that we could be a really important contributor and coalition partner. And so I'm going to add that to my to-do list. Thank you for reminding me about that, because it's been so critical too. I mean, with some of the challenges that we've seen families going through in distance learning. So we really need to be at that table. So thank you.
Yeah. All right, thanks. Let's see. Anybody else? All right. I will then move us along to the next part of our presentation. And if you do have any questions, always feel free. Our contact information will be on the last slide, and you can follow up with any of us at any time. So one of the bills that we were running this year would have directed the Human Services, Education, and Employment and Economic Development departments at the state to build on their current collaborative efforts by creating a series of plans to help people with disabilities secure competitive integrated employment at livable wages. And it was getting great traction and responses, and we were having committee hearings, and then it got lost in the shuffle when the legislature shifted its focus to COVID-19 related issues. So we're in discussion now about how we might come back to that in the 2021 session, but we just wanted to highlight an example of what we're trying to work towards for many more people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Minnesota. So in this video, Eric Marshall is a 27-year-old with a disability, and he finds his work at the TCF Bank Stadium and Marcus Theaters incredibly rewarding. So I think Maddie's going to go ahead and play this video for us.
Hello, please be a little patient. I am using an augmentative device to communicate with you. My name is Eric Marshall. I am 27 years old. I enjoy sports of all kinds. I like to cheer on all Minnesota teams. I like spending time with family and friends. I enjoy traveling as often as I can. I thought it would be easy to find a job. It is not so easy, and you really have to be persistent. I have also found that it can be hard to find a business to work with my schedule since I have such a busy life. Since I graduated, I have been busy. I found Ashland Productions Theater in Ark Valley Village as volunteer opportunities to build vocational skills while looking for paid jobs. I am now working at TCF Bank Stadium for Minnesota Gopher football games, and I work at the Marcus Movie Theater. I leverage many different job support services. Some are local supports from fellow employees, and other times I work with job coaches to assist me in more challenging aspects of my work life. Transportation can be a big issue for many disabled people. I use Metro Mobility when I can to get to work. It is important to work. I really like to earn money, interact with people, and give back to my community. It makes me feel proud to provide for my needs. Although it was a challenge to work with all the different agencies and providers to get a job, I was able to work through it. We visited over 100 businesses and approached the movie theater 7 different times before they were willing to take a chance on me. Fortunately for me, I have successfully found employment. I am sharing my story to help make sure other people with disabilities can find success as well. Don't be afraid. Get out there and go for it. It may take some time, but it is worth it. Thank you.
All right. So that's another example of testimony. You've got 2 great examples of testimony that were provided by people who have lived experience and can really speak for themselves and share their stories with our legislators at hearings this past year, and making sure that people who have disabilities and have lived experience are the ones that are actually sharing their stories is really important to us as we do our public policy work. So we are so grateful for you, for all of the previous support that you've given the ARC Minnesota, and for joining us here for this event today. As you heard from Alicia and myself, the need for our work at the public policy level is truly greater than ever. And we know that with your continued generosity, we can succeed at the legislature in allyship and accompliceship alongside people with disabilities in creating a community and a future that is bright for everyone. So I'm asking you to consider making a gift today or at year end to support our efforts going forward. You can do that easily at our website, www.arcminnesota.org/donate, or in response to any of our upcoming campaigns or fundraisers. So that's a wrap for today. Again, thank you so much for your support. And if you have any additional questions, like I said before, please feel free to reach out to Alicia or I directly. I hope that you all stay safe and healthy and positive during these challenging times. And we look forward to seeing you at a future one of these sessions. Thanks everybody so much for coming today.